What is my mother doing in that photo? The rain beats my window while her eyes look at me from the paper. 5 years of absence. Her jasmine perfume no longer permeates the house, only silence and faded memories, until my granddaughter touches my shoulder. Grandpa, I found this. Between her small hands, the brooch I thought lost, and in her eyes, the same shine she had. Suddenly, I breathe again. Like it, if this touched your heart. It is more than a click. It is a silent hug. Comment how you think this story is going to end. And if you still haven't subscribed, it costs you nothing, but for us it means a lot. Thank you for being here. The Menezes mansion stood imposing on the hill like a modern castle of glass and steel, dominating the city's horizon with arrogance. Its wide windows reflected the sunset while the clouds darkened, announcing the approaching storm. Inside, surrounded by luxury and solitude, Artur Menezes contemplated the rain that was beginning to hit the glass. At 65 years old, Artur had built a real estate empire that had provided him with everything money could buy, but nothing his heart truly longed for. The walls of Italian marble and the floors of noble wood could not fill the emptiness that inhabited inside him for 15 years, when Elisa, his wife, left forever after a long illness. "Mr. Menezes, do you need anything else?" asked Joaquin, the butler, interrupting his thoughts. "No, thank you. You can retire," answered Artur without looking away from the window. When Joaquin left, Artur walked slowly toward the grand piano that occupied the center of the main living room. His fingers caressed the keys without pressing them, as if he feared awakening the memories that slept in those notes. He hadn't played for years. Music had been his passion before business, and responsibilities absorbed him completely. On the walls, photographs framed in silver told the story of a life of professional successes, but empty of affections. Among them, a black and white image stood out for its simplicity. A young Artur next to Elisa, smiling in the gardens of the mansion with the piano visible through the windows. That photograph, taken 30 years ago, was the only visible vestige of happier times. The sound of the telephone broke the silence. "Mr. Menezes, the board awaits your decision about the acquisition of the land downtown," informed the voice of his assistant. "Tell them we will proceed as agreed," answered mechanically. After hanging up, Artur poured himself a whiskey and observed the plans spread out on the table. Another luxury building, another exclusive shopping center, one more piece in his empire. However, for the first time in many years, he wondered for whom he was building all that. Without children, without family, without an heir to continue his legacy. The rain intensified, furiously hitting the windows while lightning momentarily illuminated the room. Artur let himself fall into his Italian leather armchair, feeling the weight of solitude more intensely than ever. Outside, the wind blew strongly, like a premonition of the changes that were to come. The next morning dawned grey and wet. The storm had subsided, but a persistent drizzle continued falling over the perfectly cared-for gardens of the mansion. Artur ate breakfast alone, as always, while reviewing the quarterly financial reports. The figures showed a sustained growth, but no longer gave him the satisfaction of before. The intercom doorbell rang, interrupting the stillness. "Sir, there is a girl at the main entrance," informed Roberto, the chief of security. "She says she sells flowers, but I have instructed her that she must leave." Artur frowned. It was not common for someone to reach the entrance of the mansion, protected by a sophisticated security system and high walls. "A girl? How did she manage to get to the door?" "She said she walked from the bus stop." "She is soaked, sir." Something in the situation awakened Artur's curiosity. Perhaps it was the boredom of his routine, or perhaps an inexplicable impulse. "Put her on the camera," he ordered. The intercom screen showed the image of a girl about 11 years old, thin and with dark, wet hair stuck to her face. She was wearing a worn yellow raincoat and holding a small bouquet of wildflowers, protected in a plastic bag. Her eyes, large and dark, looked directly at the camera with a mix of determination and fear. "Let her enter as far as the porch," Artur indicated, surprised by his own decision. Minutes later, he observed the girl from the entrance hall window. Roberto had led her under the shelter of the porch, but kept her at a prudent distance from the main door. The little girl shivered slightly, but maintained her dignity, holding her modest bouquet as if they were the most valuable flowers in the world. Artur opened the door and went out to the porch. Close up, the girl looked even more vulnerable, with her worn shoes and the raincoat too big for her. Fragile figure. "Good morning," said Arthur with a neutral tone. "What brings you here in this weather?" The girl raised her gaze, revealing a face of delicate features and intelligent eyes. "I sell flowers, sir," she responded with a soft but firm voice. "They are to help buy food." There was something in her way of speaking, a dignity improper for her age, that moved Arthur. "What is your name?" he asked. "Leah, sir." At that moment, Arthur noticed that the girl's gaze had diverted towards the interior of the hall, fixing on the black and white photograph hanging on the wall. Her eyes widened with astonishment, and she took a small involuntary step forward. "Do you know that photograph?" asked Arthur, intrigued by her reaction. The girl shook her head, but her eyes remained fixed on the image. "Roberto, you can withdraw," ordered Arthur to the guard, who walked away with evident reluctance. When they were alone, Arthur invited Leah to enter the hall, feeling an inexplicable need to understand what had provoked that reaction. Once inside, the girl stood motionless in front of the photograph as if hypnotized. Her small fingers gripped the bouquet so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "What is happening?" insisted Arthur. Leah turned to him, with eyes bright with contained emotion, and after a moment of doubt, murmured, "My mother loved you." The words remained suspended in the air, like an interrupted musical note. Arthur felt time stop while he processed what he had just heard. "Your mother?" he asked with an barely audible voice. "Who is your mother?" The girl pressed her lips together, as if doubting whether she should continue. A drop of water slipped from her hair to her cheek, mixing with what could have been a tear. "She was called Clara," she finally responded. The name hit Arthur like an unexpected wave. Clara. It had been over 10 years since he had heard that name, but just pronouncing it was enough for a torrent of images to return to his mind. Clara had been his domestic employee, a young woman, discreet and with a kind smile, who worked at the mansion for almost 2 years. He remembered her small figure moving silently through the rooms, her way of arranging the flowers in the vases, always with exquisite taste. And above all, he remembered the conversations they had during the last months, before she disappeared without any explanation more than a brief resignation letter. "Clara," repeated Arthur, as if the name could materialize the woman. "Are you Clara's daughter?" Leah nodded, studying every reaction on the man's face. "Come in," said Arthur, leading the girl toward the main living room. "Joaquin," he called the butler, who immediately appeared, "bring something hot for the girl and a towel." The living room, with its wide windows and elegant furniture, seemed to intimidate Leah, who stood in the center, not daring to touch anything. Her eyes scanned the room until they stopped at the grand piano. "Do you play?" asked Arthur, following her gaze. "No, sir," responded Leah, "but my mom used to say that music is like talking without words." The phrase provoked a shiver in Arthur. He himself had said that to Clara one afternoon, when he surprised her listening spellbound while he played a Beethoven sonata. Joaquin returned with hot chocolate and a towel. Leah thanked him with an education that contrasted with her disheveled appearance. After drying her hair and taking a sip of the drink, she seemed to gain confidence. "I brought something," she said, leaving the flowers on the table to open the small backpack she carried under the raincoat. From it, she extracted a blue-covered notebook, worn from use. She opened it carefully and turned several pages until she found what she was looking for. "My mum kept this." It was a pencil drawing done with notable talent. It showed a man in profile playing a piano, identical to the one that dominated the living room. The pianist's face, although drawn with simple strokes, was unmistakably Arthur's, perhaps somewhat younger. "She drew it from memory," explained Leah. "She used to say that there was a good man who played the piano, and that one day he would return." Arthur took the notebook with trembling hands. He flipped through the pages, finding more drawings. Landscapes, flowers, portraits of unknown people, and, surprisingly, several sketches of the mansion seen from different angles. "Where is your mother now?" he asked, although something in the girl's sad eyes had already given him the answer. "She died 3 years ago," responded Leah with a firm voice, like one who has learned to pronounce painful words without breaking. "There was a fire in our boarding house." Arthur closed his eyes for an instant, feeling an unexpected pang of pain. "Who do you live with?" "With my Aunt Elena, but she is sick now," responded the girl. "That's why I sell flowers to buy medicine." The butler returned discreetly. "Mr. Menezes, you have an urgent call from the board." "Tell them I will call later," responded Arthur without taking his eyes off the notebook. For the first time in many years, business could wait. The afternoon advanced, while Arthur listened to Leah's fragmented story about her life with Clara. The girl spoke with a maturity improper for her age, like one who has had to grow up too quickly. She mentioned her mother's temporary jobs, the frequent moves, the stories Clara used to tell her before sleeping, and in all of them, the reference to a man who played the piano appeared. "Mom used to say that music can keep secrets," commented Leah, looking at the instrument. "Is that true?" Arthur stood up and walked towards the piano. He opened it with reverence, like one who uncovers a chest of memories. "Your mother was right," he responded, passing his fingers gently over the keys without reaching to press them. "Music keeps what words cannot express." A doubt began to form in his mind, a question he did not dare to ask. The dates, Clara's silences, her sudden departure, everything began to fit into a disquieting pattern. "How old are you, Leah?" he finally asked. "I will turn 12 next month," responded the girl. Arthur did a quick mental calculation. Clara had left the mansion a little over 10 years ago. It was possible that the sound of the telephone interrupted his thoughts. "Excuse me for a moment," he said to Leah, heading towards the device. While Arthur attended the call in the adjoining room, Leah cautiously approached the piano. Her fingers grazed the keys with reverence, as if afraid of awakening some sleeping spirit in them. She pressed a key, and the crystalline sound resonated in the room. From the other room, Arthur heard the solitary note, and something stirred inside him. The voice on the other side of the phone continued talking about contracts and negotiations, but he was no longer paying attention. "I will have to call you back later," he interrupted abruptly, and hung up. When he returned to the living room, he found Leah curiously examining the photographs on the mantelpiece. She stopped especially before one that showed a young Arthur next to a boy about 10 years old. "Is that your son?" asked the girl. "My brother," responded Arthur with a grave voice. "His name was Lucas. He disappeared when he was little." "I'm sorry," said Leah with sincere empathy. Arthur approached and took the photograph. Lucas's smiling face, frozen forever in childhood, looked back at him. "It was many years ago. My parents never recovered." The silence that followed was charged with unformulated questions. Arthur felt there was a deeper connection between Leah's appearance and his past, but he couldn't decipher it. "It's getting dark," he observed, looking out the window. "Will your aunt be worried?" Leah shrugged her shoulders. "She knows that sometimes I take a while to sell all the flowers." Arthur's expression darkened. "I cannot allow you to return alone in this weather. I will send my chauffeur to take you." While waiting for the driver, Arthur made a decision. "Leah, would you like to come back tomorrow?" he asked. "I would like to know more about your mother." The girl's eyes lit up. "Really?" "Of course. And bring your notebook. I would like to see more drawings." When the chauffeur arrived, Arthur handed Leah an envelope. "For your aunt's medicine," he explained before the girl's surprised gaze. Leah hesitated a moment before accepting. Then, in an impulsive gesture, she hugged Arthur. The contact, brief and unexpected, left the man speechless. "Thank you, Mr. Menezes," said the girl. "Mum was right about you." While he watched the car drive away in the rain, Arthur felt that something had changed irremediably in his orderly existence. That night, for the first time in more than a decade, he sat in front of the piano and began to play. The following morning dawned clear, as if the storm of the previous days had been only a premonition that had already fulfilled its mission. Arthur woke up before dawn, after a night of restless sleep populated with memories and fragments of forgotten conversations. He dressed in casual clothes, something unusual in his routine, and went down to the office. On the mahogany desk, he arranged several old folders, the records of the staff who had worked at the mansion during the last decades. He was looking for answers that he didn't exactly know how to formulate. "Do you wish to have breakfast, sir?" asked Joaquin from the door. "Yes, thank you." "And Joaquin," he added when the butler was about to retire, "do you remember Clara?" The butler's face, usually impassive, showed a glimmer of recognition. "The young woman who worked in cleaning, yes. Very efficient and discreet. Do you remember anything special about her? Something that caught your attention?" Joaquin seemed to reflect. "Now that you mention it, she liked very much to listen when you played the piano. Sometimes I surprised her, stopped in the hallway next to the living room door." Arthur nodded slowly. He remembered the afternoons when, after finding her listening, He invited her to stay. At first, Clara was shy, but with time they began to converse. They spoke of music, of books, of interrupted dreams. She had told him that she grew up in orphanages, that she never met her biological parents, that she dreamed of studying art someday. "Did she ever mention having a daughter?" asked Arthur. "Not that I remember, sir," responded Joaquin, although she used to receive personal calls that she handled with much discretion. When the butler left, Arthur opened the personnel folder. Clara's file was surprisingly brief. Clara Morales, 25 years old at the time of her hiring. Without family references, 2 years of service. A sudden resignation, for personal reasons and nothing more. The intercom sounded. It was Roberto, the chief of security. "Sir, the girl from yesterday is here." Arthur looked at the clock. It was barely past 9. "Let her through." Leah arrived at the office escorted by Joaquin. She was wearing clean but simple clothes, jeans, a light blue t-shirt and a light jacket. Her dark hair, now dry and combed, framed a face that was becoming increasingly familiar to Arthur. "Good morning, Mr. Menezes," greeted the girl formally. "Good morning, Leah. Have you had breakfast?" The girl shook her head. "Then accompany me," said Arthur, leading Leah to the dining room where a hearty breakfast awaited them. While they ate, Arthur observed the girl's gestures. There was a delicacy in her way of holding the cutlery, of bringing the cup to her lips that spoke of a careful education despite the difficult circumstances. "How is your aunt?" asked Arthur. "Better, thanks to you," responded Leah. "She was able to buy the medicines." The conversation flowed naturally. Leah told him about her school, her favorite classes, art and literature, her dreams of being a painter someday. Arthur listened attentively, surprised by the girl's maturity and sensitivity. "Did you bring the notebook?" he asked when they finished breakfast. Leah nodded and took it out of her backpack. This time Arthur examined it more closely. There were sketches of urban landscapes, portraits of people in the park, studies of light and shadows. The talent was evident, but what most impressed Arthur was discovering that not all the drawings belonged to Clara. "Did you draw these?" he asked, pointing to some pages with a slightly different style. "Yes," responded Leah with shyness. "Mom taught me. She used to say, 'That drawing is like guarding pieces of the soul.'" On the last pages, Arthur found something that left him breathless, a pencil portrait of Clara. It was the face he remembered, with her large and expressive eyes, the soft smile, the hair gathered in a braid. But there was something more, a detail he had never noticed before, the subtle resemblance to the photograph of his brother Lucas. "Can I keep it for a moment?" he asked, referring to the notebook. "Of course," responded Leah. "But it is the only thing I have of Mom. I promise I will return it to you," assured Arthur. "There is something I need to check." They went to the living room, where Arthur sat at the piano and began to play a soft and melancholic melody. Leah stood beside him, watching him with fascination. "This was your mother's favorite piece," explained Arthur. "Nocturne Op. 9, No. 2 by Chopin." "I recognize it," whispered Leah. "Mom would hum it sometimes, when she thought no one was listening." Arthur's fingers slid over the keys, with renewed skill, as if the years of silence had never existed. The music filled the mansion, awakening sleeping echoes. "Your mother used to say that this melody reminded her of a home she never knew," commented Arthur when he finished playing. Leah's eyes welled up. "How do you know?" Arthur gently closed the piano lid. "Because she told me one autumn afternoon, sitting exactly where you are now." After having lunch on the terrace, where Leah marveled at the view of the gardens, Arthur led her back to the office. He had made a decision during the night, but needed to be sure. "Leah," he began with a serious tone, "would you mind if I try to find out more about your mother?" The girl tilted her head, curious. "How?" "I know someone who could help us reconstruct her history," explained Arthur. "A reliable private investigator." Leah was silent for a moment, as if weighing the proposal. "Do you think he will find something important?" "I don't know," responded Arthur with honesty. "But there are questions I need to answer." After Leah's approval, Arthur made a call. Half an hour later, a man about 50 years old, dressed with sober elegance, presented himself at the mansion. "Santiago Vega, at your service," introduced the investigator, shaking Arthur's hand. "We have worked together on other occasions. I appreciate your discretion and speed," responded Arthur, inviting him to sit down. "This is Leah, the daughter of the person I want to investigate. Santiago greeted the girl with a kind smile that softened his serious face. "Pleased to meet you, Leah." Artur explained the situation. He needed to know Clara Morales's complete past, from her childhood in orphanages until her death in the fire. Especially, he wanted to know if there was any connection with the Menezes family prior to her hiring as an employee. "I have a photograph," he added, showing her the portrait drawn by Leah. "And this is the address of the last boarding house where they lived." Santiago took meticulous notes while listening. "Is there any particular rush?" he asked. Artur looked at Leah, who was observing the scene with attention. "Yes," he responded. "The time we have lost is already too much." When the investigator left, Artur proposed to Leah that they take a walk through the gardens. The afternoon was pleasant, with a gentle breeze swaying the tops of the centenary trees. "My wife designed these gardens," commented Artur while they walked along a path flanked by rose bushes. "Elisa loved flowers." "They are very beautiful," responded Leah, stopping to observe a butterfly that briefly landed on a white rose. "Mom also liked flowers very much. That's why I sell them." They arrived at a small gazebo surrounded by wisteria. Artur invited Leah to sit on one of the stone benches. "Can I ask you something personal?" said the girl, surprising Artur. "Of course. Why do you live alone in such a big house?" The question, formulated with childish, direct simplicity, touched a sensitive nerve. "I suppose because I got used to the solitude," he responded after a moment of reflection. "My wife died 15 years ago. We didn't have children." "Don't you feel lonely?" "Every day," admitted Artur with a sad smile. "But work kept me busy. Until now, I hadn't realized how empty my life was." A complicit silence settled between them. In the distance, the murmur of a fountain and the singing of birds composed a natural melody. "My mom also felt lonely," commented Leah finally, "but she said that as long as she had her drawings and her memories, she would never be completely alone." "Your mother was a wise woman," responded Artur. Back at the mansion, they found Joaquin waiting for them at the entrance. "Mr. Menezes, you have a visitor. Mr. Rivero is in the living room." Artur frowned. Ricardo Rivero was his personal lawyer and rarely showed up without a prior appointment. "Leah, would you mind waiting in the library? Joaquin will show you where it is. There are many books that might interest you." When the girl walked away with the butler, Artur headed to the living room. Ricardo Rivero, a thin man about 60 years old, stood up when he saw him enter. "Artur, forgive the intrusion," he apologized. "But an urgent matter arose that requires your attention." "What is it about?" "The acquisition of the land downtown," explained Ricardo. "Legal complications have arisen. The board is worried about your sudden distance." Artur realized that, for the first time in decades, he had neglected his business responsibilities. "I will take care of it tomorrow," responded with firmness. "Today I have personal matters to attend to." The expression of surprise on the lawyer's face was evident. Artur Menezes had never prioritized the personal over business. "By the way," added Artur, "I need you to prepare the documents to create a foundation. I will send you the details soon." After saying goodbye to Ricardo, Artur headed to the library. He found Leah absorbed in a large art book, studying the reproductions of the great masters with admiration. "Do you like it?" he asked. "It's wonderful," responded the girl without looking away from a Van Gogh print. "Mom used to tell me stories about these painters." Artur sat next to her and began to explain details about the works and their creators. For the first time in years, he felt that he was sharing something truly valuable. The telephone interrupted the moment. It was Santiago. "Mr. Menezes, I have found something you should see immediately." Artur's office had been transformed into a makeshift research center. On the mahogany table, Santiago had arranged several folders, photographs, and old documents. Leah remained seated in an armchair in the corner, flipping through her notebook, but visibly attentive to the conversation. "I started with the orphanages," explained Santiago, pointing to a series of yellowed documents. "Clara Morales entered the system at 3 years old. There is no record of her biological parents, only a note that indicates abandonment in unknown circumstances." Artur examined the papers with a frown. "Nothing about her origin?" "That's the interesting part," continued Santiago. "In the official records there is nothing, but I found this in the archives of the first orphanage." He extracted a worn envelope that contained a small silver child's bracelet with a name engraved. Clara. It is the only personal object she had when they found her, explained the investigator. And this. He showed the photocopy of a small black and white photograph, almost faded by time. In it, 2 children were seen, a baby in the arms of what appeared to be a nanny. May I? Asked Arthur, taking the photocopy with trembling hands. Although the image was blurry, there was something familiar about it. The background showed what could be a garden with a structure that suspiciously resembled the gazebo where they had been that afternoon. Where did you get this from? It was among Clara's belongings when they found her, responded Santiago. But there is more. I followed her trail through 3 different orphanages until she was temporarily adopted by the Morales family when she was 7 years old. She lived with them until she was 16, when the family moved abroad and she decided to stay. And after that, she worked in several houses as a domestic employee, continued Santiago. Here is the list, and this is the most significant. He extended a document with the letterhead of Menezes Enterprises. Personnel Division. Clara worked in the Valenti Mansion, your family's associates, 6 months before being hired here. Arthur stood motionless. The Valentis had been close friends of his parents and partners in several real estate projects. The coincidence seems too great, commented Santiago. I don't believe in coincidences, responded Arthur. There is something else, added the investigator, lowering his voice and glancing sideways at Leah, who was still distracted with her notebook. I found her medical record. When she was admitted to the hospital after the birth of her daughter, the form showed a different name. He passed him a document where it clearly read, Clara Menezes, birth name, Clara Menezes Lucas. It seems like a registration error, suggested Santiago. But it is not an error, interrupted Arthur, feeling that he was running out of air. Lucas was the name of my missing brother. A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the sound of the pages Leah was distractedly turning. I need to access the family archives, said Arthur finally, the ones that are in the safe at the central office. I can pick them up tomorrow first thing, offered Santiago. No, I will go personally, decided Arthur. There are things I must see for myself. When the investigator left, Arthur approached Leah, who had put down the notebook and was watching the sunset that was tinging the gardens orange through the window. Leah, he said softly, would you like to stay here? Tonight. We can call your aunt to let her know. The girl turned, surprised. Really? There are many empty rooms, responded Arthur with a smile. You can choose the one you like best. After dinner, Joaquin led Leah to a room in the east wing, decorated in pastel tones with a canopy bed that amazed the girl. It looks like a princess room, she commented, touching the soft bedspread with her fingers. It was my wife's favorite guest room, explained Arthur. Elisa used to say that here you had the best dreams. When he left Leah settled, Arthur went to his office and extracted an old key from a drawer that he hadn't used in years. He opened an antique piece of furniture located in a corner and took out a family photo album that he hadn't looked at again since his parents' death. The yellowed pages held images of happy times, his young parents, himself as a child playing in the gardens, family celebrations, and there was Lucas, his younger brother, always smiling, always mischievous. Lucas was only 5 years old when he disappeared during a family trip to the coast. The searches were unsuccessful. His parents never recovered from the tragedy. His mother died a few years later, consumed by grief. His father threw himself obsessively into business as a way to escape suffering. Arthur slowly turned the pages until he reached the last photograph where Lucas appeared. Something caught his attention. In the background of the image, barely visible, the figure of a small girl, perhaps 2 or 3 years old, was faintly discerned, sitting on a garden bench. A chill ran down his spine. He took a magnifying glass from the desk and examined the image carefully. The girl wore a light dress and had dark hair tied back in 2 pigtails. On her wrist, a silver flash could be a bracelet. The revelation struck him with the force of a wave. Clara was not only the woman who had loved him in silence, she could also be the sister he never knew he had, kidnapped along with Lucas when both were small. He closed the album, overwhelmed by the implications. If his suspicions were correct, Leah, the girl who was sleeping under his roof that night, was his great-niece. The sound of a light melody interrupted his thoughts. It came from the main living room. Arthur went there and found Leah sitting at the piano, pressing random keys, creating an improvised and melancholic music. "Sorry," said the girl when she saw him. "I couldn't sleep." "Don't apologize," responded Arthur, sitting next to her. "Music is always welcome in this house." He began to play softly, guiding Leah's inexperienced fingers over the keys, teaching her a simple melody. The girl learned with surprising speed, as if music was part of her deepest nature. "You have talent," commented Arthur. "Like your mother." "Did Mom play the piano?" "Not that I know of," responded Arthur. But she understood music like few others. She felt every note. They continued playing until Leah began to yawn. Arthur accompanied her back to her room. "Good night, little one." He said goodbye at the door. "Good night, Mr. Menezes," responded Leah and added in a whisper, "I'm glad I found you." That night, for the first time in many years, the Menezes mansion did not feel empty. The next morning, Arthur woke up with renewed determination. After making sure that Leah was comfortably installed in the library, reviewing art books under Joaquin's watchful eye, he went to the central headquarters of Menezes Enterprises. The glass and steel building that dominated the city's financial center now seemed alien to him, as if it belonged to another life. The employees received him with the usual mix of respect and fear that he had always cultivated. No one dared to comment on his absence in recent days. "Good morning, Mr. Menezes," greeted Martina, his personal assistant for 20 years. "The board has been asking for you." "Later," responded Arthur dryly. "I need to access the family archive first." The woman nodded, handing him a magnetic card. "Do you want me to accompany you?" "No, thank you. This is personal." The family archive occupied a shielded room on the top floor of the building. Arthur rarely visited it. It contained historical family documents, old business records, and personal objects from several generations of Menezes. After passing 3 levels of security, Arthur finally entered the room. The air conditioning maintained a constant temperature to preserve the documents. The walls were covered with metal, shelves with numbered boxes. He went directly to the section corresponding to the time of Lucas's kidnapping. Box 473 contained all the police reports, press clippings, and documentation related to the case. For hours, Arthur meticulously reviewed each document. The police investigation had been exhaustive but fruitless. The leads were quickly exhausted. One testimony caught his attention. An employee of the hotel where they were staying mentioned seeing 2 children, a boy and a small girl, being put into a dark vehicle. A girl. In the official reports, only Lucas was mentioned. Arthur kept searching until he found the complete original statement. Indeed, the witness had mentioned 2 children, but the police had dismissed that part of the testimony because the family had only reported Lucas's disappearance. A terrible suspicion began to form in Arthur's mind. Was it possible that his parents had not reported Clara's disappearance because they did not want her existence to be known? Was Clara perhaps? The sound of his telephone interrupted his thoughts. It was Santiago. "Mr. Menezes, I have found something crucial," announced the investigator. "Clara's original birth certificate. It was filed under another name in the municipal records." "What name?" asked Arthur, although he already intuited the answer. "Clara Menezes Lucas," responded Santiago. "And there is more. The certificate shows that she was born at Clínica San Gabriel, the same one where you and your brother were born. The registered parents are Eduardo and Helena Menezes." "Your parents?" The revelation, although expected, struck Arthur with force. He slumped into a chair, overwhelmed by the truth. "Clara was my sister," he murmured. "My little sister." "It seems so," confirmed Santiago. "By the date of birth, she was almost 3 years old when the kidnapping occurred. But there is something even stranger. There is no official record of her existence in the public family archives. It is as if they had tried to erase her." Arthur remembered the silences of his childhood, the closed rooms, the removed photographs. He had always attributed these behaviors to the pain over Lucas's loss, but now everything took on a new meaning. "Santiago, I need you to investigate my parents," he said with a grave voice. "Specifically any document related to Clara's birth, and I want to know why they tried to hide her existence." "Understood. Anything else?" "Yes. Find out everything you can about the Valenti family and their relationship with my parents during that time." After hanging up, Arthur continued reviewing documents until he found a folder marked as Confidential EM Personnel. The initials corresponded to Eduardo Menezes, his father. Inside there was a set of letters, medical reports and photographs. One of the images showed a newborn baby in her mother's arms. On the back, a handwritten inscription, "Clara, our little miracle." The medical reports revealed a painful story. Clara was born with a heart condition that required multiple surgeries during her first years of life. Her prognosis was uncertain. A letter written by his father to a medical specialist abroad explained, "By recommendation of Dr. Valente, we have decided to keep Clara's existence private until her condition stabilizes. The pain of losing her would be unbearable, especially for our eldest son, Arthur, who is already very attached to her." The pieces began to fit together. His parents had hidden Clara's existence for fear of losing her. When the kidnapping occurred, perhaps they decided to continue with the secret, hoping to recover both children without exposing the truth. But there was something that remained unexplained. Why, even after the tragedy, did they never tell him about his sister? Arthur carefully stored the most relevant documents in his briefcase and headed for the exit. In the elevator, he made a decision. It was time to confront the only living witness from that time who might have answers. Alberto Valente, the son of Dr. Valente and current president of Valente Industries, had been a close friend of his parents and one of the executors of the family will. In the lobby, he crossed paths with Ricardo Rivero, his lawyer. "Arthur, I was just looking for you," said Ricardo. "The board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow. They are worried about your sudden distance." "Tell them I have urgent family matters," responded Arthur. "And Ricardo, I want you to prepare the documents to create a foundation. It will be called Clara and Lucas. I will send you the details tonight." The lawyer looked at him with surprise, but nodded without asking questions. Arthur had always been a man of firm decisions. Back at the mansion, he found Leah sitting at the piano, trying to reproduce the notes he had taught her the night before. The sight provoked such an intense emotion that he had to stop for a moment at the threshold to regain his composure. The girl, noticing his presence, turned with a smile. "Mr. Menezes, I am practicing the melody you taught me." "You are doing very well," responded Arthur, approaching. "You have natural talent." He sat next to her, and they began to play a simple four-hand piece together. The music filled the mansion, awakening echoes of a past that was beginning to reveal itself. "Leah," said Arthur when they finished, "do you remember if your mother ever mentioned the name Valente?" The girl frowned thoughtfully. "I'm not sure," she responded, "but there is a drawing with that name in her notebook." She got up to look for the notebook she had left on a nearby table. She turned several pages until she found what she was looking for. It was a pencil sketch of a stately house. In the lower corner, Clara had written, "Valente House, Mauer," where it all began. The Valente mansion stood majestic on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by centenary pines and impeccable gardens. Unlike the modernity of the Menezes mansion, the Valente residence preserved a classic, almost aristocratic air, with its neoclassical columns and arched windows. Arthur stopped his car in front of the main entrance. He had decided to come alone, without prior notice. Some matters required the surprise factor. The butler who received him seemed momentarily disconcerted by his presence. "Mr. Menezes, what an unexpected surprise. Mr. Valente is in the back garden. Do you want me to announce you?" "It is not necessary, I know the way," responded Arthur, advancing through the large hall decorated with antiques and family portraits. He crossed several rooms until he reached a door that led to the terrace. From there, he spotted Alberto Valente, sitting at a table under a pergola covered in wisteria. At 70 years old, Alberto retained an imposing figure and a face that reflected the power he had wielded for decades in the business world. "Arthur," he exclaimed upon seeing him, getting up with apparent joy. "What a pleasant surprise. We haven't met in months." Arthur shook his hand with professional courtesy. "Alberto, I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all. I was reviewing some reports, but nothing that cannot wait." "Sit down, please," he invited, pointing to the chair in front of him. "Coffee? Perhaps a brandy?" "Coffee will be fine," responded Arthur, studying the face of the man who had been almost an uncle to him during his youth. While the butler retired to prepare the coffee, Alberto observed him with curiosity. "You look changed, Arthur. There is something different about you." "Circumstances change people," he responded enigmatically. I have been discovering things about my family that I did not know. An almost imperceptible shadow crossed Alberto's face. What exactly are you referring to? Artur extracted a photograph from his briefcase, the image of Clara as a baby that he had found in the family archives. Do you recognize this girl? He asked, sliding the photograph onto the table. Alberto looked at it for a long moment. His expression remained controlled, but his hands resting on the table tensed slightly. It looks like an old photograph of your family, he responded cautiously. Where did you find it? In my father's confidential archives, explained Artur. It is Clara, my little sister, the sister whose existence they never told me about. The butler returned with the coffee, momentarily interrupting the conversation. When they were alone again, Alberto sighed deeply. I hoped you would never have to face this story, he finally said. Your parents wanted to protect you from the pain. Protect me. Artur's voice acquired a harsh tone. They hid from me that I had a sister, even after losing her. Alberto took a sip of his coffee before answering. Clara was born with a serious heart condition, he explained. The doctors, including my father, didn't give her more than a year to live. Your parents, especially your mother, couldn't bear the idea of you becoming attached to her, only to lose her later. That's why they decided to keep her existence private, at least until her health improved. But it improved, didn't it? Pressed Artur. In the medical reports I found, at 2 years old her condition had stabilized. Yes, it surprised all the specialists, confirmed Alberto. They were planning to officially introduce her to society, fully integrate her into the family when the tragedy occurred. Artur placed another photograph on the table, this time the one showing Lucas and, in the background, little Clara. Both were kidnapped that day on the beach, not just Lucas. Why did my parents never report Clara's disappearance? Alberto briefly closed his eyes, as if the question caused him physical pain. It was a terrible decision, Artur. Your mother was devastated, on the verge of collapse. The police had started the search for Lucas, but the first 48 hours produced no leads. Your father feared that if they revealed Clara's existence at that moment, under those circumstances, it would generate a scandal that could harm the chances of finding the children. A scandal? Artur couldn't believe what he was hearing. Society was different then, explained Alberto. A prominent family hiding the existence of a daughter, especially one with health problems, would have generated all kinds of speculation. Your father thought it would be better to keep the search focused on Lucas, while he hired private investigators to search for both children. But they never found them, concluded Artur with bitterness. Not alive. At least that's what they believed, responded Alberto. 6 months after the kidnapping, one of the investigators found evidence suggesting that the children had been taken abroad and that they had died during the transfer. Your father broke down. Your mother never recovered. Artur felt a mixture of anger and pain at these revelations. Clara did not die, he finally said. She survived, grew up in orphanages, and eventually worked as a domestic employee. She even worked in this house, Alberto. Did you know who she was? Alberto's expression turned from surprise to bewilderment. What are you saying? Clara, your sister, worked here. That's impossible. Clara Morales, Artur specified. She worked here 6 months before being hired at my house. I have the records that prove it. Alberto seemed genuinely shocked. I remember a young woman with that name, yes. My wife hired her to help with event organization. She was efficient and discreet. But I never imagined. Are you completely sure it was her? Artur took out the birth certificate that Santiago had found. Her real name was Clara Meneses Lucas. And this is not all, Alberto. Clara had a daughter, a girl who is now 11 years old, and who, by some strange design of destiny, arrived at my door a few days ago. Alberto's face visibly paled. My God, Artur, this is extraordinary. Where is Clara now? We must reunite them, rectify this terrible mistake. Clara passed away 3 years ago in a fire, responded Artur with a grave voice. She never knew who she really was. She never knew I was her brother. A heavy silence fell between them, broken only by the singing of birds in the garden and the gentle murmur of a nearby fountain. I deeply regret it, said Alberto finally. It is a tragic story that should not have happened. What do you plan to do now? I want the complete truth, responded Artur with determination. I want to know how Clara ended up working precisely at your house and then at mine. I want to know if it was truly a coincidence or if someone orchestrated these encounters. Alberto reflected for a moment. My wife passed away 5 years ago, but her personal assistant still works for me. She was in charge of hiring the domestic staff. Perhaps she can provide us with some information. He called the butler and asked him to locate Mercedes Ortega, his assistant. While they waited, Alberto observed Artur with a mixture of compassion and curiosity. You mentioned that Clara's daughter arrived at your door. How exactly did that happen? Artur briefly told him about the encounter with Leah, the drawing notebook, and how little by little they discovered the connection between them. It's as if Clara found her way back home through her daughter, commented Alberto. Leah is extraordinary, responded Artur. She has her mother's artistic talent and a special sensibility for music. She is starting to learn piano. A sad smile appeared on Alberto's face. Like your mother, Helena was an exceptional pianist before social obligations consumed her time. Mercedes Ortega arrived shortly after. She was a woman about 60 years old, efficient in appearance and with a sharp gaze. She listened attentively to Arthur's story and questioned. I remember Clara Morales perfectly, she said when Arthur finished. I hired her on Mrs. Valente's recommendation. She met her at a benefit exhibition for orphans where Clara was helping to serve canapes. She was impressed by her education and discretion. And do you know how she ended up working at my house afterwards? Asked Arthur. Mercedes exchanged a look with Alberto before answering. Mrs. Valente specifically recommended her. She said she would be perfect for your home, Mr. Menezes. Why would she do that? Insisted Arthur. Mercedes hesitated for a moment. Mrs. Valente always had a special interest in Clara. She treated her with particular kindness, almost like a protégée. I once heard her say that. Clara reminded her of someone she had known a long time ago. Arthur looked inquiringly at Alberto, who seemed as surprised as he was. Carmela never mentioned anything special about that young woman to me, said Alberto. Although now that I think about it, she did show unusual interest when Clara decided to leave our employment to work at your house. A new piece of the puzzle began to take shape. Carmela Valente had been a close friend of his mother. If anyone could have recognized Clara, it was her. Did your wife leave any diary, letters, anything personal where she might have mentioned Clara? Asked Arthur. Alberto nodded slowly. Carmela kept a diary. I have kept it in her desk, intact since her death. I never dared to read it. Perhaps the time has come, suggested Arthur. While Alberto went to look for the diary, Arthur remained on the terrace, contemplating the gardens where Clara had worked years ago. Would she have felt some inexplicable connection with this place? Some distant echo of her true identity? His phone vibrated. It was a message from Joaquin. Leah asks when you will return. She seems restless. Arthur replied that he would return soon and to take good care of her. The girl had become, in just a few days, the center of his universe. Clara's daughter, his niece. Alberto returned with a leather-bound book, worn by time and use. Carmela's diary, he said, handing it to Arthur. If there are answers, they will be here. That night, after making sure Leah was sleeping soundly, Arthur retired to his office with Carmela Valente's diary. Alberto had handed it over with the sole condition that he return it once the necessary information had been extracted. The diary covered the last 15 years of Carmela's life. Arthur began with the most recent entries, looking for mentions of Clara. He did not take long to find them. March 15, 2011. Today, Clara came to help with the party preparations. Every time I see her, the resemblance overwhelms me. Those eyes, that way of tilting her head when she listens attentively, it is like seeing Helena reincarnated. I wonder if Alberto has noticed anything, but he was never as close to the Menezes as I was. Should I say something? After so much time, perhaps it is better to observe, wait, make sure. April 3rd, 2011. Clara mentioned today that she would like to work in a quieter place. The idea came as an illumination. The Menezes mansion. What if I could reunite the siblings without them knowing? A small act of poetic justice. I have spoken with Mercedes to recommend her. May 7th, 2011. Clara has been accepted at Artur's house. I am nervous and expectant. Will he notice the resemblance? Will they feel that invisible connection that unites blood? I know I should tell the truth, but after so many years, who am I to unearth such painful secrets? Perhaps it is better to let fate take its course. If they are destined to recognize each other, they will do so without my intervention. Artur put down the diary for a moment, overwhelmed. Carmela had recognized Clara, had seen the resemblance to his mother, and had deliberately orchestrated her meeting with him, but she had not revealed the truth to either of them. He continued reading, jumping back in time, looking for the first mention of Clara. January 19th, 2011. Something extraordinary happened today. During the benefit event for the San Gabriel orphanage, one of the young women serving appetizers dropped a tray near me. When she bent down to pick it up, apologizing profusely, I saw her clearly for the first time. I almost fainted. It's her, I'm sure. The same eyes, the same expression. I asked her name. Clara Morales. Could it be possible after so many years? Could she be little Clara Menezes? I have discreetly asked for information about her. Orphan, grew up in institutions. The age matches. I can't sleep thinking about the possibilities. Artur continued going back in the diary, looking for more clues. The next relevant mentions appeared years ago when Lucas and Clara disappeared. June 17th, 1990. Lucas's symbolic funeral today has been heartbreaking. Helena is destroyed. Eduardo maintains an exterior strength, but I know that inside he is devastated. And that little one, Clara, who no one speaks about publicly, will there also be a private funeral for her? Social hypocrisy has created a tragedy within another tragedy. If they hadn't hidden her existence, perhaps now they would have doubled the support to look for her. September 2nd, 1990. Today Eduardo confided something terrible to me. They have received information that the children possibly did not survive the kidnapping. There are no bodies, only vague reports from an anonymous informant. Eduardo is devastated. He has decided to abandon the active search, although he will keep investigators paid indefinitely. He has asked me never to mention the subject in front of Helena again. He says it is the only way she can continue living. The following entries showed the gradual deterioration of Helena, Artur's mother, plunged into a depression that eventually led to her premature death. Eduardo, his father, had taken refuge in work, obsessively expanding the business empire as a form of escape. Artur closed the diary, feeling a mixture of sadness and rage. So many secrets, so many wrong decisions made with the best intention. His parents, trying to protect him, had created a void in his life that he never knew how to identify. Carmela, recognizing. Clara, years later, had attempted a silent repair without daring to reveal the truth, and Clara, his sister, had lived and died without knowing her true identity, although fate, in its mysterious wisdom, had led her back to the home she never knew. The sound of light footsteps interrupted his thoughts. He looked up and saw Leah in the office doorway, barefoot and in the pajamas Joaquin had bought for her. "Can't you sleep?" asked Artur softly. The girl shook her head. "I had a strange dream. My mom was playing the piano, but I couldn't see her, only hear her." Artur got up and approached her. "Dreams sometimes bring us important messages. Perhaps your mother wants you to continue learning music. Can I play now?" asked Leah. "Just a little." Artur looked at his watch. It was past midnight. "Only if we do it very softly," he conceded, so as not to wake Joaquin. They went to the living room, where the moonlight streamed through the large windows, creating an almost magical atmosphere. Artur turned on only a small lamp, providing the minimum necessary illumination. Sitting together at the piano, they began to play a soft melody. Leah followed Artur's instructions with surprising ease, as if music was part of her deepest nature. "Mr. Menezes," said the girl after a while, "have you discovered anything important today?" Artur looked at her, surprised by her perceptiveness. "Yes, Leah, I have discovered many things about your mother and about my family. Good things or bad things? Sad but important things," responded Artur after a moment of reflection. "Sometimes knowing the truth hurts, but it is necessary to be able to heal." Leah nodded, as if she understood perfectly. "My mom used to say that scars are maps that show us where we have been, not where we are going." The wisdom in such simple words moved Artur. Clara had educated her daughter with deep values despite the difficulties. "Your mother was an extraordinary woman," he said, with a voice broken by emotion. "I know," responded Leah. "That's why she drew so much. She used to say that every drawing guarded a little piece of her soul that no one could ever take away from her." They continued playing in the dim light, the melody floating softly in the air like an invisible thread connecting the past with the present. At some point, Leah rested her head on Arthur's shoulder, overcome by sleep. With infinite tenderness, Arthur carried her in his arms to her room. As he tucked her in, he noticed the drawing notebook on the nightstand. He took it and began to flip through it again, this time with a deeper knowledge of its meaning. Among the last pages, he found a drawing he had not seen before. It showed a family, a young woman holding the hand of a small girl, and by her side, a tall man with a piano in the background. Beneath it, in Clara's neat handwriting, an inscription, "The family we dreamed of." Arthur felt the tears, contained for so long, finally find their way. Clara had loved him in silence, without, knowing that the bond she felt was much deeper than a simple affection. She had dreamed of a family with him, without imagining that they were already family by blood. With a heavy but determined heart, Arthur returned to his office and began to write. He had a lot to organize, many decisions to make. Dawn found him still working, planning a future that, for the first time in decades, had a clear purpose. The inauguration of the Clara and Lucas Foundation was scheduled for 3 months after the day Leah arrived at the Menezes mansion. During that time, Arthur completely reorganized his life. He delegated the daily management of his companies and focused on 2 priorities: the creation of the foundation and Leah's well-being. Santiago had presented his final report with incriminating evidence. The document revealed that Dr. Valente, Alberto's father, had orchestrated the kidnapping of Lucas and Clara as revenge against Eduardo Menezes, who had married Helena, a woman Valente obsessively loved. The investigation also suggested that Alberto might have covered up his father's crimes for years. The day before the inauguration, Arthur received Ricardo and Santiago in his office. "Are you sure you want to proceed?" asked Ricardo. "The implications are considerable." "Completely," responded Arthur with firmness. "I have lived too long in the darkness." That night, Arthur found Leah drawing in the garden. "Nervous about tomorrow?" he asked. "A little," she admitted. "Will Mr. Valente be there?" Arthur was surprised. "How do you know about him?" "Mom drew him once," explained Leah. She wrote underneath, "The Man of Lies." She showed Arthur the portrait in her notebook. It was undoubtedly Alberto. Sometimes Mom talked on the phone with someone she called Mr. V. Shortly before the fire, I heard her say, "I have proof now. He can no longer deny it." Arthur then understood that Clara had not only discovered her identity, but possibly the involvement of the Valentes in the kidnapping. That would explain the accidental fire that cost her her life. "Important things will happen tomorrow," he said with a serious but reassuring tone. "Are you prepared?" The girl looked at him with her large eyes. "Mom always used to say that the truth is like the rain. Sometimes it hurts when it falls, but it cleanses the world." The Menezes mansion received more than 100 guests for the inauguration. In the main living room, a large portrait of Clara stood out, next to the only existing photograph of Lucas before his disappearance. Alberto Valente arrived with an undecipherable expression. "Arthur, what a moving event," he said, shaking his hand. "And this must be Leah. Pleased to meet you, little one." "Thank you for coming," responded Arthur with cold courtesy. "The speech will begin soon. I hope it will be enlightening for everyone." When everyone was seated, Leah performed Chopin's Nocturne on the piano, Clara's favorite piece. Afterwards, Arthur went up to the podium. "For almost all my life I believed I was an only child," he began. "I knew about Lucas, kidnapped when he was a child. But recently I discovered a buried truth. I also had a sister, Clara, kidnapped along with him." A murmur ran through the audience while Arthur explained how destiny had brought Leah to his door. "The foundation we are inaugurating will support children without family and will finance investigations into cases of missing persons, especially those linked to trafficking networks." He continued, "Because sometimes those responsible for these tragedies are not strangers, but people close to us, people we trust." Alberto visibly paled. Leah took a step forward and spoke with a clear voice. "My mother never knew who she really was, but she always felt she belonged somewhere. She taught me not to give up, to seek the truth, and to believe that love finds its way, even if it takes time." The girl placed flowers before Clara's portrait, moving everyone present. After the ceremony, Alberto requested to speak with Arthur in private. "You have gone too far. began Alberto in the office. "You don't have solid evidence." "I have enough for an official investigation," responded Artur. "Your father orchestrated the kidnapping and you covered it up." "I had nothing to do with the kidnapping," Alberto defended himself. "When I discovered what my father had done, it was too late." He confessed that his father had planned the kidnapping as revenge against Eduardo Meneses for having married Helena. He also revealed that, contrary to what they had led him to believe, Lucas possibly survived and was adopted by a family in Brazil. Before leaving, Alberto dropped a final revelation. "Clara never told you, did she? Who Leah's father was?" "It was me, Artur. We had a brief relationship before she left. I didn't even know she was pregnant when she left." In the following days, the story of Clara and Lucas Meneses became national news. Alberto Valente called a press conference where he admitted his father's guilt, resigned all his positions and announced his cooperation with the authorities. A week later, he visited Artur looking tired but serene. "I leave for Brazil tonight," he informed. "The prosecutor has accepted my collaboration in exchange for certain considerations." He handed him a briefcase with documents about Lucas. According to these archives, Lucas survived and was adopted by a family in Salvador de Bahia. He lived there until he was 16, when he apparently fled. The last image is from 1999, when he would be about 20 years old. "Why are you showing me this now?" asked Artur. "Because I believe Lucas might be alive. And if so, he deserves to know the truth as much as Clara deserved it. I owe you at least that." Before leaving, Alberto added, "The piano in your living room originally belonged to your mother. My father gave it to her before she met Eduardo. After the kidnapping, he sent it to your house as an anonymous gift. Perhaps he hoped that someday the music would reunite what was left of your family." That night, Artur played the Chopin Nocturne, feeling a renewed connection with his mother, with Clara, and with Lucas, whose destiny now seemed less definitive. Santiago was sent to Brazil and returned weeks later with news. He had followed Lucas's trail to Rio de Janeiro, where he had worked as an English teacher under the name of Luis Cardoso. "We lost him in 2010 when he apparently moved to Europe, possibly Spain," informed Santiago. "We are still investigating." On Leah's 12th birthday, celebrated intimately at the mansion, Artur gave her an upright piano for her room. "It's the best gift in the world," said the girl. "Now I can play for Mom every night." That same night, Leah showed Artur the silver bracelet with the name Clara engraved. "This bracelet made Mum suspicious about her true identity," explained. "She kept it all her life as her most precious possession." 6 months later, an email from Santiago shook the tranquility of the Meneses mansion. "Lucas found. Lives in Barcelona. Current name Luis Cardenas. Music teacher. Shall we proceed with contact?" Artur contemplated the attached photograph for a long time. The resemblance to his lost brother was undeniable, although time had carved his features. After consulting with Leah, they decided to travel to Spain together. Barcelona welcomed them with a radiant sun. Following Santiago's instructions, they went to a conservatory in the Gothic Quarter. There, in a bright classroom, a man about 40 years old was teaching piano to a group of children. They observed the class from the hallway. The man had the same profile as Eduardo Meneses, the same way of tilting his head when listening, the same gestures that Artur remembered in his brother. When the students left, Artur and Leah entered shyly. The teacher looked up. "Can I help you?" Artur felt that he was running out of air. After so many years, so many searches, so many broken dreams, there he was in front of him, the boy he had lost. "My name is Artur Meneses," he said with a trembling voice. "I am looking for my brother Lucas." A shadow crossed the man's face. He stood motionless, studying Artur as if trying to decipher an impossible riddle. "Lucas Meneses died many years ago," he finally responded. "At least that's what they told me." "They lied to you," responded Artur, "as they lied to all of us." For hours, in a small nearby cafe, Artur told him the complete story. Lucas. Now Luis listened in silence, his eyes revealing a whirlwind of emotions. "I always knew there was something more," he finally said. "Fragmented memories, recurring dreams of a child calling me, a melody I couldn't forget." "It was me," murmured Artur. "We were always calling you." Leah, who had remained quiet, opened her backpack and took out Clara's notebook. "My mother drew this," she said, showing him a sketch. 2 children playing next to a piano. Luis observed it with trembling hands. "Clara," he whispered. "I remember her. My little sister. I always asked about her, but they told me she had died during the trip." "She never stopped looking for you," said Leah, in her own way. A month later, the Menezes mansion resonated with music again. Luis had accepted Arthur's invitation to stay while they reconstructed their family history. In the living room, uncle and niece played four hands while Leah watched them, drawing the scene in her notebook. The inauguration of the new headquarters of the Clara and Lucas Foundation brought together hundreds of people. On the stage, a grand piano shone under the spotlights. Luis sat in front of it, with Leah by his side. Arthur took the microphone. "This melody was composed by my brother Lucas, now reunited with us after 30 years apart. It is titled Return, and it is his way of honoring the memory of our sister Clara, whose love and persistence made this reunion possible." The music that emerged from the piano filled the room with an indescribable emotion, notes that spoke of loss, search, pain, but also of hope, reunion, and healing. When the last note faded, Leah stepped forward and unveiled a portrait, Clara smiling, with the piano in the background. Beneath the image, an inscription, "Love always finds its way back home." Luis hugged the girl, his niece, the daughter of the sister he never got to know as an adult. Arthur joined the embrace. The family, fragmented for decades, finally reunited. "Your mother would be proud," whispered Luis into Leah's ear. "She is here," responded the girl with absolute certainty. "In every note, in every stroke, in every heartbeat. She never really left." As the moved audience applauded, Arthur contemplated Clara's portrait, and for an instant it seemed to him that he saw a smile of satisfaction on her painted lips, as if she had finally completed her mission, to bring everyone back home.